Hello and welcome back to the Maze of Moral Ethics podcast. I'm Abbey, your host, and with me today is Emelia. Emelia is a college student who is passionate about our topic today, which is doping scandals within the world of sports. Emelia, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi everyone, I'm so happy to be here today. Thank you so much for having me. I am an undergraduate student at James Madison University, and I became very interested in this ethical dilemma of drug use in sports because my family and I are huge sports fans, and this has definitely become a big interest to me during my undergraduate time here at JMU.
Alrighty, let's dive into the meat of the podcast. Emelia and I will be discussing the use of performance-enhancing drugs in professional sports and why it is wrong, along with information about how PEDs are used, the consequences, and the long-term effects. This topic is extremely hot within the media as sports are a large part of American culture. PED use can be correctly portrayed in the media if only facts are used. However, information sometimes is biased because of the individuals reporting personal opinions, along with opinions of athletes and coaches. Our hope is for everyone to gain an understanding of the vast use of PEDs in sports and how it impacts society, as well as why they are so dangerous and prohibited. Emelia, what exactly are PEDs?
So according to the United States Anti-Doping Drug Agency, the USADA, performance-enhancing drugs have the ability to alter the human body and the way it functions. And doping occurs due to the desire to improve athletic performance as a whole. And they're urging the public to be aware of the drastic anatomical, psychological, and physiological side effects. And there are a ton of concerns that come along with using drugs and PEDs. And something important to note is that a lot of athletes turn to PEDs not only to enhance performance, but to help with injuries, to self-treat mental illnesses, and to alleviate any physical pain.
We are really stressing this topic because it's important to inform the public of these things that come along with PED use. Many of the young athletes just don't understand the effects that using PEDs can have on their life physically and emotionally, and the physical effects can be long-term and short-term, in which some examples will be brought up later in this podcast.
So just to give some basic knowledge, there are a ton of categories like anabolic steroids, human growth hormones, diuretics, creatine, stimulants, and a ton of other ones. And the most common PEDs would be hormones with anabolic properties like growth hormones and insulin. And the idea behind the growth hormones is to increase muscle mass through doping. And this is common not only in athletes who perform in group settings, but also people who are weightlifters. And they do this even though research has shown that the side effects from PED use can be deadly.
More of the worry comes from the high amounts of use with PEDs. The use of performance-enhancing drugs within the athletics world is used to gain a competitive advantage within their sport. Sports are specifically looked at with the PED use due to the large audience they have surrounding their appearance, but PEDs are also very commonly used within weightlifters.
That's a really good point, Abby. Thank you for bringing that up. PED use is actually more common within weight training athletes because they can get away with it because there are natural and non-natural competitions. And there's definitely a lack of focus on the long-term side effects that come with PED use, and that's why a lot of people think that PEDs are okay for recreational use and that it won't affect the rest of their life. But research has shown that PED use is specifically linked to an increased risk of death with an increase in other health concerns like cardiovascular, psychiatric, neurological, and endocrine disorders, and that oftentimes the larger health trials can't accurately replicate what the athletes or weightlifters are putting their bodies through with mixing PEDs, strenuous activities, and other substances like marijuana or alcohol.
Maybe if more observational studies were performed, it would increase the knowledge of PED use within our society.
Yeah, for sure, definitely.
Yeah, hopefully that would raise the public awareness of the consequences that come with PED use. A huge way our society sees PED use in sports is within social media. Personally, I follow several fitness influencers such as Sam Sulek and Chris Bumstead, following influencers who are natural and take PEDs, along with following influencers who compete in lifting and those who are transparent in running races. It gives many different perspectives. With those influencers who are fully transparent on their social media pages, we're able to see how PED use truly affects their body along with their strength, which is eye-opening for the public.
Yeah, and I think another thing that's super important that we definitely have to cover today would be any public scandals that maybe our listeners would even be familiar with.
I actually did hear about a past scandal in one of my health classes. I had also heard of another PED scandal, which was on a CNN segment with Anderson Cooper. Anderson Cooper was on the phone with Juliet, a reporter from the New York Times, and they were discussing the cyclist Lance Armstrong had previously stated he had never tested positive for doping as an athlete, but the doping agency stated they had collected samples in 2009 and 2012 that were consistent with blood manipulation, including erythropoietin use or blood transfusions. Lance Armstrong faced new doping charges where he claims the USADA had a vendetta against him. The USADA brought forth more information with the doping conspiracies within the team Armstrong was on. They stated that he encouraged this behavior. With this scandal, there was a lot of what-if factors or unknowns, but at the end of the day, Armstrong did test positive for blood manipulation, and he did break the rules.
Wow, I've actually never heard of that scandal, but the test results speak for themselves. With these scandals, it's also important to discuss rules that have been put into place regarding the use of PEDs in sports. The World Anti-Doping Agency, the WADA, is the organization that oversees all anti-doping regulations across the world and also tests athletes who are participating in the Olympic Games. The WADA has found it more difficult to keep the use of PEDs under constraints because of the vast growth of how many different PEDs are emerging. And to help enforce these regulations, they've been able to better understand compounds being made and strategies athletes use. And they've also been looking into provider reasons for prescribing PEDs and focusing some efforts on educating these providers in the hope of stopping of prescribing the PEDs. And I definitely think that to prevent the use of PEDs, precautions should be taken with educating people about preventative measures and pharmacological interventions.
Now that we've discussed the scandals throughout the world, why don't we dive into your research, Amelia, with the PED use on JMU campus and how their students and faculty feel about it?
So I was able to speak to 32 individuals on the JMU campus, and 6 of them were faculty and staff. And I just asked them whether or not they thought PED use should be allowed in sports and if they had any additional information that they wanted to share. And interestingly enough, only 6 of them said yes, PED use should be allowed in sports.
Amelia also shared some of the comments that students and staff had shared about on the survey. Some students thought, I think they should be allowed in sports, but with an open division where people can do whatever, and then a closed one where people are tested for steroids. I also think they should probably be legalized or regulated in general because for so many people, especially late teens and early 20s, take them. So if they're more legal or regulated, then probably be safer and they'd probably be more aware of the risks that come with taking PEDs. The staff's general consensus was certainly painkillers are necessary, but performance-enhancing drugs are completely out.
It was super interesting to see what the JMU community thought about PED use in sports. And it was also super fun to be able to go out and talk to a bunch of different people about this topic.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing all that data with us. Now, Amelia, what is your stance on PED use?
I believe that the use of PEDs in sports is wrong, and there should definitely be consequences for using them. And this is because using any type of PED can create an inequity in the sport as well as create negative short-term and long-term impact, or not long-term effects on the athlete. And this can be physical, mental, emotional, and the use of PEDs also poses a huge risk to other athletes, even if they were not the one responsible for using it, because the athlete who is responsible for using a PED could seriously injure somebody else, especially in a sport like boxing.
I completely agree. That is my stance as well. But the opposing stance with this topic would be that performance-enhancing drugs are okay to use in sports, and that there should be no consequences if an athlete is found to be using them. This is especially found in circumstances where individuals are using hormone replacement therapy to transition genders. It can also be found in situations where the athlete is hurt because PEDs can increase the athlete's performance and decrease pain so they do not get hurt again or further their injuries.
That's a super good point. Thank you for bringing that up, Abby. With all of this information, we definitely want to encourage researchers to look at the facts of PED use and how it affects the athletes as well as the lives of other people around them. And we definitely think that specific laws and regulations should be put into place around the world, and that these rules and laws should be a little bit more adaptive to today's culture, especially with lower level PEDs like creatine and pre-workout. And there is definitely a strong need for more observational studies just to learn more about PED use and all of the factors that can have an impact. And regulation methods would definitely help if they were a little bit more enhanced to ensure the proper enforcement of those rules.
Hopefully, as PED use becomes bigger, we can encourage more research with the PED use and discovering more about it. But that's all the time we have today. Thank you so much, Emelia, for coming and sharing your immense amount of information with us. We really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Abby, for having me, and thank you, everybody, for listening.